Hello. It's often a debated question as to if a literature student must be trained in the critical analysis of a text. Now, the question is if the creative juices of a writer or a poet or a dramatist be distilled in the sieve of a critique. And in the process, does not the poem or the story suffer a tragic death? Susan Sontag in Against Interpretation says that many of the critical interpretations or critical analysis of a text, especially she talks about the contemporary critical practices, dries up the aesthetic pleasure. The dry intellectual operation kind of impoverishes the art. But at the same time, there are critics like Terry Eagleton for who literature is political. But frankly speaking, I believe that an avid reader of literature and also a student of literature must be trained in receiving art as aesthetics and also developing a critical eye. He or she should know both the sides of the coin. For instance, while dealing with a short story or with a novel, he or she should be able to read it as a work of art, and in another level must be able to identify what goes into the making of the art. For instance, the plot, character, setting, style, theme, atmosphere, and etc. So, what is the work about? It's not merely the content of the work, but largely there are technical things which goes into the art of writing. And being a serious student of literature, I guess a student should be able to understand and analyze what goes in the making of a poem or a story. Also, the work must transform itself into a text. That is, an open text, open towards the possibilities of interpretations based on theoretical approaches. And when you base a text on theoretical approaches, definitely the socio-political background of the text, of the writer and of the reader comes into play. So the reader or the student of literature will be able to bring the text into a new light, which might be a gray area or an area where you're arguing all against the text or even for the text, sometimes both. In simple words, there is a primary reading of any text, of any novel or poem or story, and it's basically pleasure inducing. At the same time, there should also be a secondary reading which deals with the form of the text, the style of the text, the making of the text. And then again, there should be several readings which analyzes the text from the different theoretical approaches which are informed by the socio-political backgrounds of the writer and the reader. So that at the end of the tunnel, you can see newer lights, and it's not really the end of something, but just the beginning of the beginnings. For an experienced reader, sometimes all these levels of reading can happen at the same time, but that's quite rare. Now, for those who are interested in developing such a critical approach towards a text, I'll be dealing with a few works and their different levels of reading in the coming videos. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.